Good afternoon, everybody. I'm attorney Danyl Patterson, candidate for the 190th state rec seat. For those who don't know, I'm so West Philly baby. So I'm calling all of my friends from Cedar Park, Haddington, Dunlap, moving over to Carroll Park, up to Cathedral Park, East Parkside, Belmont, West Powelton, down to Mill Creek. Can't forget about my friends in Winfield Heights, 5 Points, West. Allegheny and West Lehigh Avenue. You're all my proposed constituents. I'm going to speak it into the future and say constituents, but mostly you are my family and friends. I'm coming to you live today. Social Media Studios is back, but I'm the one that had to set it up again. So we had a little bit of technical difficulty while I tried to figure it out, because I couldn't figure out about what a camera jack mode was and which one I was supposed to actually push. Oh, and since we were in the campaign office giving away things yesterday, making sure that we were out feeding the community, they reset and styled my hair. So they said, "Give me that," and they took it upstairs and restyled it and had out bumpers. I done learned so much about what you can do with a wig. I feel like I'm Wendy Williams out here, because they have made it so that I can make it through the pandemic, at least looking good for you. So we've got a whole bunch of updates today, and I've got information that folks have given me. So thank you so much. I have to thank Yanni Williams and Ernie Bristow. You know, some of the information I give is just because I've made so many contacts. They give me the ball, I run with it, go research it, so I can give you even more information on the how-tos and what-fors. So we're going to talk about me a little bit today, because some questions came out yesterday to some just folks on the street. It was interesting. They weren't as interested in my platform as they were about me, because many people who came by yesterday when we were outside, they've seen me everywhere, and have always seen me everywhere. So it was kind of like this. It was like welcoming an old friend when they see you. I remember you. Didn't you stand up to fight for the closing, to keep that school open? Wasn't it you that advocated for additional, schools? My kid went to that school. Weren't you the one that did that program for the seniors, where, people really remember? And so it's always a pleasure to know that my more than 25 years of being a service and a servant in my community has not gone just not unnoticed, but unbenefited from. And that's the whole goal, to make sure that we are all achieving all of our full potential together. So it was a pleasure just to talk to people on that regard, because as we've been not just on the campaign mode, but more in pandemic crisis, that it's all been about immediate needs, and developing a plan for the future. I told you before, I don't know what kind of politician I am, because I don't think that I, deserve credit for learning to tie my shoes. I just don't. It's something that I do because I need to. And that's how I see service in the community. It is something I do because I need to. I get joy out of it. And I've told you time and time again that one of the best things for me, just in calming me, has been that I've been able to help so many while, this pandemic is going on. Not just talking about our future, but, really able to do some hands-on help. And I've been able to use that skill and that talent and that education I had, that, again, nobody in this race does, to make some real immediate change and impact in the community. So, and I say that because, the legal business is booming right now. You all may not know that. All we see is that the courthouses are shut, but the legal business is booming. And I'm even going to talk about why I decided that being a lawyer was a great thing. But what I'm going to tell you is, I learned a long time ago that the law, having a law degree and passing the bar, actually gave me an entree into a skill set to just help people. Because you need lawyers for everything in this walk of life. You need us for everything. Not only do we draft the laws, that we become judges and interpret the laws and apply the laws. You need lawyers in human resources in large corporations. You need lawyers to determine about whether or not workers' rights are being violated, to fight for the small guy and make sure that everybody's getting the income they deserve. Do you know how many times corporations decide they weren't going to pay time and a half for overtime and overwork their employees? I know y'all see that Jeff Bezos is on his way becoming the first trillionaire, all because of what's going on in the pandemic, and is paying the folks at Amazon less and less. So those are all the things today that we're going to talk to you about, and we're going to talk to you about some of the different resources that have come across my desk. I thanked the folks earlier, Ernie and Yanni, because I watched their page and I was like, hey, I didn't know that was open yet. And so not only did we look local, to that particular institution, but I looked to others that were already out here ready to do this crisis applications and how you can get one. And so, because I told you all, if you recall weeks ago, when we talked about how should you spend your money right now, what we told you was, and I think I had Kamari Ellis on the Finance Rebel, and he told you, hey, don't forget cash is king. Hold on to your money because you don't know when some more is coming. But also because one of those things that we could project is there were going to be additional programs to help you. So we're going to talk about those additional programs, where they stand now, how you get help, is it automatic? And also, as the states start to open back up, that means that more and more people are going to be forced to return to work. That's the other thing. Myself and Gary Bailey had long conversations with you, more than one, about what that actually meant, opening back up and the unemployment policies and how that was going to impact you. We talked to you about what was going to go on with workers' rights. We know that they passed the change in the legislature about who was going to be deemed not just essential, but what were healthcare workers' rights going to be and what were their protections going to be against lawsuits at the many hospitals. I'm going to take a look over here on the side because I see some of my friends are here. Hey, Emmanuel, Miss Peggy. Glad to see you, Charlotte. I have not caught you online in a while. I caught your live briefly, but I couldn't get sound, and then I actually was answering questions, so I had to get back to that. And Zahira, thank you so much. Please continue to tag your friends. Unfortunately, because my written, directed, produced, advertised, marketed, planned by Danyl Patterson doesn't always go as planned. I didn't get an opportunity to actually do the advertisement in advance. So first, I'm just going to give you an update on yesterday. So as you know, during this entire pandemic, my team has made sure that we've been doing contactless delivery of foods, because we know specifically that the 190th is basically a food desert. We have more supermarkets than we had before, but if you look per capita, we don't have the same access to food and availability and ability to actually reach the food as you do in many, many other jurisdictions. So if you're looking, which is why I've told you that we got to look beyond just the two fresh grocers and the ShopRite, we also need to be looking at the Sunshine Food Market and the Cousins Food Market and our local little butchers that we have in the community, little meat markets, because we got to make sure we can get what we need to get. That we need to make sure that we know where the produce stands are, where the local growers are, because all these things exist up and down the 190th. But the other thing is that we've really promoted the idea that you need to stay at home. You need to provide for your family from the comfort of your home. Well, that's problematic in the 190th. And why? Because like everything else that happened in this pandemic, rules changed all along the way. What happened? So you had Fresh Grocer and you had Parkside, ShopRite, that had rules about delivery. Well, they changed those rules and upped it to a $75 and $100 minimum delivery purchase. And that was if you could get a window. And then ShopRite and Parkside, you did not yet have the delivery service that they had and promoted in Cheltenham, and they had it in the new Winmore, got to get it right, Winmore store, but we didn't have it out there in West Philly. So that meant our folks could not get their food, because what else was missing? The hacks are not outside of Fresh Grocer the way they used to be. Look, I'm so West Philly. The hacks are out there, okay? I'm honest about it. And a lot of folks rely upon that. That's the only way they can get their foods back and forth. Cousins Food Market had upped their delivery fee on what was considered free. And a lot of people didn't have $100 worth of groceries to be able to get the food. You know, it's not in walking distance, and that stuff is heavy. And so what happened? We were able to assist. I told you personally, I was actually filling shopping orders. So I was out here getting my Instacart on, but I had rules about that. If you needed that assistance, contact the office, get your shopping order, let me know when your pickup time was, and I would go pick it up and I would deliver it to you. Personally, my team helped, but I personally got out there and did that. And you saw some of the photos show up online, which I had trouble with, because not because folks were happy to take the pictures, but I'm not happy to be a poverty pimp. And that's what I call it. I'm not the person, every single one of us has needed a hand up every so often. It's not a handout. You needed a hand up. Everybody I know has needed some help somewhere along the way. And I'll talk about myself personally, okay? Because again, you don't know about the candidate. When I was very young, my father was injured in an accident and actually shattered his hip. And as a result, he was only the second hip transplant patient in the city of Philadelphia. It was actually experimental surgery. So, after that happens, back then, hips weren't like they are now. Hips back then, we were assumed to be disabled. So while my father was waiting on his disability, and he was the primary breadwinner in the household, all of a sudden, mom has to go back to work in a bigger capacity, and dad is at home. So, our family income was decimated. And these were during the Reagan years. And so, I know all about the food stamps that you used to get out, and I know all about the cheese line and the surplus cheese, which still makes the best macaroni and cheese. I know all about that. But it was not a hand out to us. It was a hand up, because during that time, my mom was able to go back to school and she started her own business. And I talk to you guys about that all the time, and about how her little small business, she had a preschool program in West Philadelphia and Southwest Philadelphia, serving only 120 kids in 1984. And she only had 8 employees in 1984. And when she retired in 2013, she had close to 500 employees at 22 locations, serving 1,900 children a year. So, going from a $200,000 a year grant to a $15 million a year grant, providing wraparound education and preschool education. So my mother was always very proud to tell you that she served her babies from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in some capacity, 6 days a week. When our mom went back and started that business, my father, I recall, I just told you that, he was considered to be disabled. Well, he went back to school and became an RDN, a registered dietary nutritionist, and started teaching farm to table eating out in the community, helping to plant a community garden at 54th and Wyalusing. I'll never get these correct. My uncle used to sell the fruits and vegetables right there at the corner of 52nd and Wyalusing. And we're going to be out there on Monday with the fruit and produce stand at 52nd and Wyalusing on Monday. So we'll give you some advertisements on where you can come through and pick up fresh fruit and vegetables. So that's what I mean when I say everybody needs some help. And I know that back then, when my parents were in that situation, I was a young buck. I was what, 7 and 84? I don't know, I gotta count. I don't know. My math is, I gotta count with my fingers. I'm like that person. But 8. There you go, 8. So the problem there is this: is that I know my parents were proud. I don't know how they would have felt had they been, on the side of a milk carton because they needed help and had to stand in line to get it. So as a result, and people are love to jump into photos, but I guess it's my own inner feeling, because everybody carries what they were taught when they grew up. Everybody. And which is why I think one of the questions or all the questions that were asked of me yesterday were really just about, hey, we remember all of this, and you are really doing your parents, your mom and dad, proud. And I think you've even seen it in some of the comments here. Some people have gotten on. Some of them are my parents' old employees. Some of them are families that, our mom and dad helped along the way, whose kids I mentored, or who the parents that my parents mentored. You never know. The foster grandparents that I worked with, talking about their sense of purpose once they got to those retirement ages. And those folks who were looking for alternative employment, they saw themselves lost along the way. Maybe they had to change a job, look into a new career. As I told you, my father was a master welder. Who would think that one day being a cook is actually what paid him? Doing family food plans and trying to get nutrition to our kids is what would provide for our family. Thank you so much, Zahira. I do. I appreciate that, because I do try to be. So now let's talk about those things. So I just gave you a glimpse right there, and I told you about my parents and starting the Presbyterian Philadelphia Head Start Learning Tree. It was right there on the corner of 57th and Washington Avenue in Southwest Philly, and you all know it. Because if you were in the 190th, your kids went to preschool at the Head Start Learning Tree. There were only so many. But specifically, I guess in the 190th, the centers were at Care to Learn up on 52nd Street at Master, and also at 42nd Street at the First African Presbyterian Church off of Girard. I'm trying to think of what that Style Street, I think that is. And also at the other Presbyterian church over there by Shoemaker. I always forget the name of it because they changed the acronyms about, for them where the different facilities were. Of course, at Penn Memorial over there on 54th and Overbrook. And then finally at Amudapes, which was at 66 and Woodbine. So we were all up and down West Philly all the time. And those are just the ones that are in West Philly. There were numerous ones in South Philly. So, of course, everybody knows the John Gloucester House in South Philadelphia. Everybody knows the North Philadelphia Health System site over there on Spring Garden. My mother worked tirelessly on behalf of children and families. And so that is who taught me that my law degree was for everybody and not just for me. What came of that? The other thing is that having parents who started a successful business, saw that grow and work together to do it, means that I was afforded opportunities to work in an environment. So I talked to you about my 20 years being an attorney, and 19 of those I've actually owned my own firm. But my entrepreneurship dates back to my mother and her initial work with the Head Start Learning Tree. You see, you don't go from having, 8 employees to close to 500, and with your daughter at your, basically in the office at your heels every day, and she doesn't learn a thing or two. Hey, gorgeous T, love. You learn a thing or two. You learn about human resources. You learn about what the community actually needs. Because I don't know if anybody on my timeline over here, do you guys know anything about Head Start? Do you guys know anything about Head Start? Because we're actually going to talk about what it means to be a Democrat and why I'm a Democrat. But Head Start is not just about preschool. It's also about teaching parents to advocate for their children beyond preschool, to teach them how to advocate and fight for and get all of the planning and supports that they need to take them on through to college. Yes, there you go. So there's Miss Osborne. Yes, Miss Osborne was one of and I always want to call her. Miss Osborne was one of Mom's early employees, and she was there for years and saw the evolution of the Head Start Learning Tree. So I'm glad to know she loved working with you too, Miss Deborah, Miss Osborne. So that's what happens with that, is that you learn, you have to learn and grow. The learning tree focused on family services. So it wasn't just about the kids that were in school. It was about what was going on in the home environment. The children can't go all day long and then go home to a house where they don't have food, where they don't have electricity, where they don't have things like, eyeglasses that they can get, which takes us on to health services, to make sure that the kids and the parents had the screenings, the healthy baby screenings, the eyeglasses screenings, all those things. I remember when they first put the Fresh Grocer over there on 56th and Market, and my mother and I had gone to go and get something from the market, and there was a little boy that ran up to our mom, and she had no idea who he was, obviously, because he wasn't so little. Because remember, her babies are between the ages of 3 and 5, so this kid was like 14 or 15. And he's like, I know you. And so my mother's like, okay, well, I don't know you. And he said, you're Miss Betty, and you're the reason I can see. And so she said, well, why'd you say that? She said, because I was walking around and everybody said I was slow, and it came to be that I just needed glasses, because that was the first time he had ever had a screening. And it was those kind of things that always made them feel so, so great. I remember working, volunteering in the kitchen. Yes, I got a serve save certificate because I had to learn to work in the kitchens to make sure the kids were getting the food on time and that was prepared healthy and safely. And the kids were going on a field trip. They were going out to Linvilla Orchards and they were taking a picnic lunch. And so, yes, we were going to go pick apples. And the little girl came over and she started screaming anger, grandmama girl, grandmama girl, grandmama. She was the cook, and that was my aunt actually. Well, she excuse me, I had to be correct. She was my grandmother, but she was my grandmother, but she said she was too young to be a grandmother, so we had to call her Aunt Gert. But then one day she decided she wanted to be a grandmother because all her friends who were her age were grandmothers. So now she wanted to be a grandmother. So I call her Grandmama Aunt Gert all the time for that reason. And many of you probably know her. My grandparents live right near 46 and Brown, Palace Street, that are now parts of the expansion on the Lucian Blackwell homes. And my grandfather had the bus barn right there across from Mill Creek. It's now, I think, an automotive shop, but it was a bus barn. And we used to rent it out to take the kids to Dorney Park and those kind of things. Again, I'm just so 190th. So the little girl burst out in tears, and she didn't want to go on the trip. She just wanted to stay in school. And so Anger said, "Well, why you want to stay in the school?" She said, "Because when we go on the trip, we're gonna get peanut butter and jelly, and I like coming to school because that's when I get to eat meat." And so then we learned that this child had a food scarcity at home, and she was not eating. And I remember Grandma Gert sending me to across the street to the Thriftway over there at 58th in Baltimore and telling me go get a pound of turkey and some cheese because she was going to get his child some meat for lunch. She was not going to make her have to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So those are people who I grew up with, and how they just impacted an entire community. And so that's just what I was taught to do. So now it's time, I'm already volunteering in the schools. And now, you're a teenager. Well, you got to do better than just volunteer. You can actually do some stuff. So, I got a driver's license. Okay, well, you got a driver's license. So here, now you can actually assist these parents getting these babies back and forth to these appointments. You got a driver's license? Good. You can do drop-offs to all of the different centers. We have families with shut-ins. I told you about the foster grandparents that working in the schools. Well, they can't get back and forth to school. So go pick them up and bring them in. So, just those little small things, and you learn so much about their life stories on the way. So I never left. I have always been in the 190th. So I was born and raised there. I went to school at Our Lady of Victory right at 54th and Summer. Then I went to high school at Phillips Academy. I'm sorry, I went to high school at Girls High School in partnership with Phillips Academy Andover, where I was able to do a study abroad program in Germany. But even then, what did I do? Come right on back to West Philly, baby. And then it was time to go to college. And everybody was buying for me to get it. I was a really good student. Okay. I was a really good student. And I remember my mother, when I graduated, everybody's like, "Oh, you're so proud, whatever, whatever." And our mother's answer was, "I don't care." She said she was going to be a lawyer. And until she walks across the stage with a law degree in her hand, I'm not clapping for that because it's not her finish. Everything is just a start for where she's going to get to. And she stood by that. Now, my father believed I knew everything. So I graduated from college. I'm from high school. He was the one, in the front row. Graduated from college. He was in the front row. But when I graduated from law school, mama was in the front row. Okay. Yes, Deborah, we had great programs to enrich entire families. And you know what? They did. They enriched entire families. Deborah, do you know, and I'm sure you do, how many of those kids came back 2 generations later to work at the Learning Tree? Because they were there for close to 40 years. So, I mean, those kids had from 3 years old, now they come back 23, 24, graduating college, and they were coming back to teach at the Learning Tree or to be, social workers at the Learning Tree or to do parent involvement or IT, because, of course, things continue to excel around them. Well, it was time to go to college. And so, and I had gotten into something like 16 schools. And I don't know if they still do that, but back then you just applied everywhere. It's like, it was like a thing, a race to like be accepted to the most schools, right? You just wanted to, like, let me just get accepted everywhere. So, I was like, oh, you got into Georgetown. I got into Columbia. I got into, University of Penn. I got into, our mother said, you better get into where they're going to make it free. That was the answer, where you can afford to go. She said, because all those acceptances are great until they send you the financial aid package and you find out you can't afford it. Because I just told you, I mean, my parents worked at a nonprofit organization. That's what they did. So we were never rich. We were just, well enough to be comfortable and to make sure that we could get the things we need, in our home. So, because money never really motivated either of my parents, that's not what they considered success. And I guess they never really gave that to me as a measure of success. What it was success for them was the legacy that you leave behind, the commitments, community impact that you're able to make multi-generational. So that's kind of always been success for me. Money's nice, hey, or who doesn't like it, but it's never been a driving force. If it's the choice between getting up every day to go and fight for somebody's rights versus getting up every day to go fight for a big paycheck, guess which one's going to get me out the bed? Okay, get going to fight for somebody's rights. So now it's time to go to college, and my mother, her family lived in like 20th and like Chew, right across the street from LaSalle, basically. And LaSalle University is a school that our mother always wanted to go to. She always wanted to still to go there, and but she couldn't because they only let men in. It was an all male school. And if women wanted to go, they had to go at night and they could only go to like secretarial pool school. That's the only thing that you could go to. And she lived right across the street from there. So it was, for her kind of culmination of education that all those years later, that LaSalle University was vying for me to come there, and they were willing to give me everything under the sun, including their most prestigious scholarship award, the Christian Brothers Scholarship, to come there, and offered me, everything under the sun to come there. So for her, when a school that had previously denied her because of her gender, because she was a woman, they did not believe in the education of women, she thought that was a shining moment and achievement in education. And so off to LaSalle I went. And then I continued in that tradition and went on to Villanova School of Law out in Villanova, PA, still commuting from Haddington. So when I got to Villanova, what happened? They told us at Villanova, oh, it's really just, we're so close to Philadelphia and we do everything in Philadelphia. But I found out they didn't. Everything that they did to benefit was for the folks of Chester County. I always had to get that right because Westchester is in Chester County. They were not for the benefit of folks in Philadelphia. So I lobbied at my law school to get the community legal services program that we had that was funded by the endowment at the Villanova School of Law to actually expand its horizons and to reach into West Philadelphia. And that is where Legal Lessons for Life was born. So now you know the story of that, and that's how I got started there. Before I was even finished law school, was that was actually born because I saw that we were not being we, meaning Philadelphians, were not being benefited by something that was so close to us and that was advertised as being a part of us. And y'all know Villanova has always considered themselves Philly because as soon as they go into the basketball finals, they're in Philly. As soon as they looking for somebody to play on their sports team, they're so Philly. Remember Brian Westbrook? I think Brian Westbrook was in college at the time that I was in law school at Villanova. And one of the draws was it was so Philly, but then it wasn't. If it still exists, it still exists. I believe the parents are more excited than students on the number of school. Thank you, Zahira. I didn't know was that still a thing. I don't know. Like I said, my father's answer was my baby know everything, and she got the paper to prove it because she kept going to school. Like that's where she was with it. That's exactly where she was with it. And so I saw that it was important that we bring those resources back to our community. So I got my fellow students together, and we still all work together. It's not just me that does Legal Lessons for Life. So we do workshops on employment. We do workshops on workers' comp. We do workshops on HR. We do workshops on paternity. We do workshops on criminal expungements. What's the process of pardon? We do workshops just on how the law impacts your life every single day. So what I see in my role as an attorney is that I'm continuing the work of my mother and father, where we teach parents how to advocate for their children. Now I'm teaching adults how to advocate for themselves and their families. That's what Legal Lessons for Life is. So now we've been through college and we've been through law school, and now you know where Legal Lessons for Life came from. I already told you that I was at this time already fighting to keep Our Lady of Victory, which is my little school on 54th and Summer, open. Unfortunately, they decided that instead of closing 3 schools, they closed 2 and merged all 3 of them together. So we at least still kept a school in our community. I advocated for the advancement and new building of the Berry School over there on 59th and Race, which is where many of the folks in the 190th, all of the folks from the 4th Ward, are going to be voting. So that's where I'll be voting for the first time, not at the Salvation Army, and instead at the Berry School that I helped to plan. So I'm excited about that. And continue to work in the community. At this time, the big thing that was going on was the change up and down Market Street, because they had closed down the SEPTA L, or at least the because they were changing the platforms. They were changing what were the supports, because there have been numerous deaths of folks driving too fast out of the counties and running smack dab into those poles. And so they did. They needed to change it, but they also needed to make plans for the folks those businesses that were up and down Market Street that were then forced to relocate, shutter, because a program that was only supposed to take 2 years took 13 years, devastating our entire community from 46th Street all the way out to 63rd. Well, I worked with those business owners to try and help them stabilize their businesses, get those grants from from the city of Philadelphia, get reparations from SEPTA, and we worked hard and we won in many, many cases. How to continue those business efforts up and down the corridor. I was eventually nominated and elected to the board of Achievability. I was the first community board member. So I was the first board member at Achievability who was not from, somewhere in the suburbs or whatever. I was actually from the community, and my advocacy was in the community. So we actually advocated, and through OHDC, we got a neighborhood advisory council, and so I was the chair of the neighborhood advisory council and the liaison to the master board of Missions First and Achievability. So I worked on that until 2015. Those projects, and under that project, that is where we got the new project at 59th and Salford. I know y'all remember when that was just a leveled out parking garage right there on Market Street. And now it's going to be what it was always intended to be, a multi-use building with childcare. I think Curtis Jones's offices are going there, going to be a parking structure and many different rooms for building. That was back before Curtis Jones was actually the executive director of PCDC. During the midst of initial planning, after Achievability had already secured the funding to do the initial land grant, and I was on a part of that, and do the initial planning, we actually did something called the Plan for Our Future. And as a part of a Plan for Our Future, one of those was the funding, the initial funding for the streetscape for the building at 59th and Salford. So I want to give a shout out to Terry Guerra, who I worked with to help write that plan, with the Baker and Company Associates as the contractor for public relations to get that done. And it took 10 long years, but I am very, very pleased that we can now say that the building is open. I just want to read this, April. Miss Osborne, you shared it, so I never share anybody's story. I just told you. Betty gave me a job, which enabled me to get off of welfare. She also provided us with online college courses, which I was able to get my ECE degree, which is an early childhood education. And that's basically our mom. That's really our mom in a nutshell. Thank you, Miss Osborne. That is really her in a nutshell. So it really is. I remember, somebody said to me, I have an entire plan around returning citizens as a part of my platform. And I've been talking to you guys about that, about making sure that our returning citizens are made whole. And let me tell you where I get that from. So I told you a lot about mom and a little bit about dad, but I'm really going to talk about daddy right now. So my dad was like the community mayor. He was that guy. He was active in the community. Everybody knew him in the neighborhood. They probably knew more people knew. Alpha. Excuse me, I'm sorry. More people know Uncle Fonzo because that's what they called him. Uncle Fonzo Patterson. Everybody knew him more so than our mom because our mom she went to work and came in the house. But my dad, he was when I told y'all yesterday that I was a stoop sitter, I was sitting on the stoop with him. He was out there all day, every day, from the time he got up until like he locked up the house at night. When he came in off the steps, so did all the kids because now it was no longer safe. He was the neighborhood adult, and he made sure that he worked with those young men to keep them off the streets. And that's very important because we at the end of the drug babies, the crack babies. That's what we are. I mean, my colleagues were being raised by grandparents at this point. And so what happened, he was really working to be the father figure for an entire community, basically. And when I tell you he was the father figure for an entire community, I remember when I graduated from Our Lady of Victory in the 8th grade, they give the diploma to the kid, not to the adults, not to kids. So when they call the child's name, the parents get up and go get the diploma. And when my name was called, my father got a standing ovation. Yes, he did. He got a standing ovation because he was the captain. He was the chair person for the basketball team. He was the PTA president. He organized the food drive, the clothing drive. He did the beef and beer. He did the community raffle. He drove us to every basketball game. If the basketball game was in Podunk, Pennsylvania, they knew how they were going to get all 15 kids there because my dad and then my grandfather, they was going to get that bus and they was going to drive them. Okay. They just made sure that they did everything. And then later on, continuing to work with those boys because they didn't have any male figure. And then what daddy said was, if we don't give our young men a chance, who will? I'm going to say it one more time. If we don't give our young men a chance, who will? And he lived and died by that. And when I say he taught them everything, down to, how to change a tire. He'd be outside teaching to be a man. He was always teaching to be a man, how to bleed the radiators, how to light the pilot in the stove. They were outside learning to barbecue. That's what they were doing. I was like, it was just man time. I have no idea what they were doing. It was man time, and I was not allowed to participate, okay? Because he was helping these boys become men. And so now some of them, their uncles and cousins were starting to come home from jail. And now they needed jobs and they just did not have them. And I remember I was sitting in the office and I was probably like 17 or 18 then. And a young man had come in and he said, "Miss Betty, I'm just trying to do better. I just want to do better." And so my mom said, "Well, baby, what did you go to jail for?" And he said, "Look, I was selling drugs." He's like, "I was selling drugs. I didn't know where else to make money. My mom was strung out. I was living with my grandmom. It's 5 of us. I was the oldest. I had to do something. So I started selling drugs." And so my mom said, "Okay, you said you didn't know what else to do. And I get that. You were a kid. You're a grown man now." And he said, "I don't want to go back to that life, but nobody will hire me." And so I remember my mother said, "So if I give you a job and I give you real benefits and you know what your pay is going to be every 2 weeks, and and I help you to go back to school, are you still going to do that again?" That's what she said. She said, "Are you going to end back up in jail again?" And he said, "Miss Betty, just give me a chance." Well, I want you to know that young man got a chance. And he started out as a custodian. And many years later, he was the head of IT. He was the person that did all the computer install, software updates, hardware updates. He actually would do the pricing, determine what computers they were going to buy. And he's living a good life. And now his daughter's in college. And that's sustainable environmental justice. That's what it is. And I want to continue in those footsteps. Yes, we do. Yeah. Yes, we do. So you're right, Deborah. A lot of the people went to Learn Tree, and then their kids went there. And so that's what I'm trying to do. So I just wanted to give you guys kind of that background into me growing up. because mostly because so many people were interested in the story, yesterday when they were just out there asking me that, because again, they saw me along the way, but they never know kind of how I got there. They saw me as the person doing work in the community, but they never knew why. They saw me as the person that was giving them, the legal lessons for life, but they didn't know how. So because I shared so much of the how and the why yesterday, and because so many of those people knew my parents, I wanted to share that more with the community at large, that I've come to know, over the past 10 weeks of doing these legal lessons for you guys. So now we're 40 minutes in, and I'm going to give y'all some community updates. So get to type in, because I need some help on these things. Okay. First, crisis applications are in and funded. So if you are having economic issues, and you now are having issues because your gas bill and your electric bill went up, because remember, they were all stayed. All the shutoffs were stayed. But we know that as soon as the stay-at-home order is lifted, within 30 days, they're going to take us off of those programs that we're already on. So that means that we need to be ready. That's always what I'm trying to tell y'all. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. That means that you guys need to be on the crisis alert lines right now. So I can tell you that Germantown Settlement is already funded, and they're already doing them. And their number is 215-843-2340. 215-843-2340. They are available between 11 and 2, Monday through Friday. On Thursdays, they're not so available. They said that what they said online is they're a little bit spotty, because they are doing food bank giveaways on Thursdays during those same times. So that just like me, they don't have so much coverage. Okay. So I want y'all to get on those phone lines tomorrow. And if you are having issues with your gas or with your electricity, that you need to make sure you're applying. So that's number one. Number two resource is that there is additional funding for the Philadelphia grant under LISC, LISC. There's additional funding. Remember, they ran out of that first round. Well, they didn't announce the second round. And the second round, you can get your applications in through the 23rd. When is the 23rd? Through Saturday, you can get your LISC applications in. It's LISC. So it's the LISC application. It's not the Verizon LISC, because Verizon had one, they ran out of money. So now they have a new one, and it's up to $10,000. So it's 3 levels: $5,000, $7,500, or $10,000 to help small businesses. So if you had a small business and you have not been funded previously by any of the Philadelphia grants, that doesn't mean you weren't funded by anybody, just that you weren't funded by the Philadelphia grants, then you can compete for this one, and you need to get your applications in. And then finally, I need to talk to y'all about affordable housing, because we ran out of the rental assistance, right? So we know that the deadline for that was Saturday. And of course, folks call me Monday. Is it still going? No, the deadline was Saturday, and they didn't give away all that money. And they didn't give away all that money because I told y'all about the hoops that everybody had to jump through to get it. So a lot of people found that they were not eligible because, one, the landlords wouldn't participate, or two, because the landlords couldn't participate, or three, because the folks who were applying for it, technically with the $600 pandemic assistance that we're getting, everybody makes too much money, and it puts them outside of the income guidelines. But those income guidelines are going to change again. And our mayor has an answer for that. As a part of the new budget, is that the budget is requiring a cut for the Philadelphia Land Trust. So that's who funds the housing programs. And they're looking at about an $8 million cut to the plan. So it's $4 million cut to affordable housing, $4 million cut to, and this is just proposed, okay, a $4 million cut to the affordable housing, so the placement and subsidies, and then $4 million cut to the shelters that take the displaced folks, and then a $2 million cut to the, so it's like 3.1, and 2 million to the program that does the modifications for folks who are differently abled and have challenges and need their housing to be modified. Now, this is huge because we know folks ain't been paying their rent. We know they can't, okay? We know they didn't have any money. And we know the hardest hit are the same folks who are getting additional subsidies and housing from the Philadelphia Land Grant. So now what's going to happen is there are going to be fewer people who are going to be able to get off of those lists with the Philadelphia Land Grant housing opportunities because, sorry, Land Trust. I had to get it right. Philadelphia Land Trust. Because now what's happening is they're going to cut the program. So that means fewer people are going to be able to be serviced. So this is our Super Tuesday, as they call it over on DKOD. And that's why I wanted to bring it up today. It's Super Tuesday. This is the day that we let our voices be heard to our elected officials. And I think that DKOD chose Super Tuesday because Tuesdays, elections are always held on Tuesday, right? So you guys know that in 2 weeks on Tuesday, June 2nd, you will have a choice to make out in the 190th. And again, I hope that you will choose Attorney Danyl Patterson, candidate for the 190th state rep seat, who you will find on the row with Joe, and push button 17 and help me get elected to continue to serve you and to serve you even better in an official elected capacity. Whereas, so that's why I think, so Zahira is telling me, yes, that's why they chose Tuesday. I just always assumed that. I never asked. But they tell you that every Tuesday is Super Tuesday because every Tuesday we need to make sure our voices are heard. Now in Philadelphia specifically, we need to make sure our voices are heard because Tuesday is the day that they set the agenda for the Thursday hearings at City Council. Am I right, Zahira? You are a wise one, Danielle. That's exactly why. So Tuesday, they set the agenda for the Thursday City Council meetings. So we want to make sure that our voices are heard in time for those City Council meetings. Now, City Council is not meeting, and one of the problems that I've been hearing as I do my phone banking, and also because our lines are busy all the time. And I don't know, people talk to me and tell me all the time they can't get in contact with their elected officials. They tell me that the voicemail is full. They send email, they don't get any response. They text and they don't get any response. Or strike that, they don't text because they can't text. But the voicemails are full and the emails are full, and that they stop by and the doors are locked and closed. We need to be able to get in touch with our city council people. We need to be able to get in touch with our governor, with our senators, with our state representatives, with our state senators. We need to get in touch with our dog catcher if they are elected by the people and paid for by the people. There should be accessibility. Wait a minute. So, Rob, I'll come to that because there's a question about that. People have been asking me about that. And there's still so much confusion about the mail-in ballots. So for those of you, I just want you to know, if you requested a mail-in ballot and you do not get it in time to vote on June the 2nd, and you go to the polling place, you will be casting a provisional ballot. You'll still vote, but it'll be provisional, and it'll only be counted once they confirm that there's nothing in the system for you anywhere else. The other thing about that is I want everybody to know that I want to remind you, it has to be at the commissioner's office by 8 p.m. on the 2nd. So there's a lot of confusion about that. Yes, we should. April, you ain't decided none but a word. Let me read this here, Rob. Okay, Zahara, you already mailed it back. So, Rob, so now this is why it's a little strange. No, it kind of doesn't work like that. On the ballot, so he's asking whether or not we can, ask for an annual, like where they would have to say, no, I want it, or I don't. Yes, I want it, or no, I don't. It doesn't work that way. But there is an option where when you request a mail-in ballot, there's an option to request a mail-in ballot in perpetuity. And that you can just always, that means every time it's time to vote, they'll just send you a ballot and you won't have to request it. Let me tell you why I am not personally choosing that option. When we saw, do y'all remember the election, what it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to be our presidential nominee? Hey, Roger White, sorry. Do y'all remember back that, y'all remember that far back when it looked like Bernie Sanders, he had this thing showed up, and that he still won Texas. No, he didn't win Texas, but that it was closer in some areas than others. And a lot of that was because of mail-in balloting. And so what happened was South Carolina happened, and Joe Biden wiped the floor with Bernie Sanders in South Carolina. And so Biden started to get a surge as a result of that. However, many people had already voted in other jurisdictions because they had done the mail-in balloting. So they didn't get the last minute information. They kind of really made up their mind. And for me, I research every candidate. I do. I research every candidate's voting record. Okay. In this case, we just had someone who just took the seat in the 190th, just took the seat literally before pandemic. So that person voted on every single piece of legislation you have seen about the pandemic. That individual voted on every single piece of legislation you have seen about the pandemic, or at least that person had the opportunity to vote on every single piece of legislation you have seen. So that person had the opportunity to vote on the changes to Act 77. That person had the opportunity to vote and determine who received the waivers for essential businesses. That person had the opportunity to vote and determine who would be considered to be an essential business. That person was able to vote and determine what were going to be the additional resources for PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, as well as the additional benefits for workers' compensation. I mean, not workers' compensation, for unemployment compensation. That person was able to vote to figure out how we're going to do the delivery of additional SNAP benefits. The person that was elected in office had a really, really big responsibility, and they have a voting record. And I would tell you for yourself, just like I did, go and research and see whether or not the person in office was able to vote along the lines that you think that they should have voted for, or if they acted in what you consider your best interest. Because this is about Danyl Patterson. This is not about any other candidates. So I don't spend my time there. The Philadelphia Home Rule Charter, we're going to actually get the ballot up for you guys to see, and I'm going to explain that probably on Thursday, because tomorrow I have a special guest, Ricky Duncan from NOMO is going to be here. And we're very excited about that. So I won't be able to talk about it tomorrow. And we're at the end of our 50 minutes, Zahira, because I know it's my fault, because 5 of them I was still fumbling, trying to figure out where the video was. Sorry about that, y'all. So that's why I did not choose the option to have them continue to just mail me, to do me a mail-in ballot, because I really want to see. I really want to have the opportunity to see the last minute rush. I want to see what the last minute attack ads are, what the last minute pro ads are. I want to see who actually receives these endorsements. And then I want to weigh them against why I believe that they received the endorsements that they did. So as a result, I'm definitely a last minute voter. I'll probably make up my mind fully when we're talking about the primary, not so much in the general, because in the general, I'm voting blue no matter who. I already knew that. The fight is in the primary. So, and that's because I'm a true Democrat. I am very frank about that. I'm a true Democrat. I have never been anything but a Democrat. I've never changed parties because it was convenient to do so. I never changed parties because I saw an opportunity to advance myself. I didn't do any of those things. I have to live and die on the Democratic Party because I believe in the foundation of the Democratic Party. And we're going to talk about what that actually means on another cast. So as a result, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I just wanted to the annual option, because then what happens is you still got to get it back by that time, that 8 p.m. on election day. So, and that becomes the problem, Rob, is that you got to get it back by 8 p.m. on election day. So you could be, and everybody knows the last 5 days before the election, that's when like next week, there are candidates forums scheduled. Next week, there are debates scheduled. Next week, there are articles that will be written on candidates. All that stuff is going to happen next week. And so I would not want to, if I had not decided on my candidate already, I wouldn't want to miss that opportunity to do that research on the candidates, knowing that my vote had to be in by a certain time, especially if I was on the fence. Now, if one of the candidates was my daughter, now, okay, I can just go ahead and vote. Like, I could just go ahead and vote. If it was my sister or my cousin, I could just go, well, no. If it was my sister, I could just go ahead and vote. My cousin, I actually probably go ahead and vote because, I know which ones of my cousins are shady. Everybody does. Doesn't mean I don't love them, but I know which ones. That's right. Exactly, April. You can make a difference from within the party that you choose if your party is important to you and not just your personal advancement. Just not your personal advancement. When it's about the people and then you want to serve within the party, you've got to do these things even when the party does not support you. Even when the party does not support you, then that means that you need to get behind the other candidate. No different than what I said about Bernie Sanders when he lost to Hillary. Then that means you need to get behind the candidate for the good of the party, not go and start your own party so that you can be a spoiler to somebody else's race. The answer is not be Bernie Sanders. The answer is not be Jill Stein and start a new party. That's not the answer. We're primarily a two-party system here in the United States. So that is where I am. I hope that I gave you a little bit more of a glimpse into who I am, kind of why I do what I do, not just how I do it, but why I do it. So understand who I was as a little girl and to see that that's still the same person I am as a woman, just a little bit more refined with a lot more experiences, some more maturity behind it, and a little bit more compassion and empathy than many others have that have come because I have been shaped and molded by many experiences across many different communities in many different crises. I am Danyl Patterson. I am the only attorney running in this race. I am the only woman from West Philadelphia in this race. I am the only candidate that you are going to find on the row with Joe in this race on June 2nd, and I am still trying to earn your vote and ask you to push button number 17 and vote for Attorney Danyl Patterson for the June 2nd primary. If you want to do it on May 30th and mail it in, then there you go too. Thank you and goodbye. Oh, I always got to remind you, and the whole purpose for this is so that we can do better together.